Hello, I'm Mr. Sino Lit, aka 文学先生. I read this book a few months ago, The Man Awakened from Dreams by Henrietta Harrison. This book brings to life someone who seems so dusty and ancient in a black and white picture seen on the cover here. His name is Liu Da Peng. The unique selling point of this book is that Liu Da Peng, this man on the right here wearing the skull cap, spent his entire life keeping diaries, and the author had access to those diaries, and it really gives us an insight into the man himself, what he was thinking, what he was feeling in the turbulent times he experienced. Liu Da Peng was born in 1857, period during the Qing dynasty, the final imperial dynasty of China. And Shanxi itself was a province. I always get these two mixed up. Let me get this right. Shanxi, that's right, that's the one. To remember this, I remember this with Shanxi that means mountain west, to the west of the mountains. That's the capital is Taiyuan, and there's also Shanxi, just to the east of this province, which is the capital Xi'an, famous for the terracotta warriors, the ancient capital Chang'an. Living in this region, near the capital city Taiyuan, in a small village called Chiqiao, Liu Da Peng's father himself was a furniture seller and furniture maker in his life, becoming a businessman, actually doing fairly well for himself, thus wishing his son could pass the Imperial Entrance Exam. Now remember, the Keju Imperial Entrance Exam was the way to a secure future in China. If the Imperial Entrance Exam itself had many levels, and to actually become a civil servant you had to pass the one in Beijing. Now that was always the goal for Liu as a young child. Now Shanxi at the time was an important trading corridor to Mongolia and Russia. Shanxi traders were quite famous across the region. So it was a fairly prosperous region at the time, but time would change over the course of Liu Da Peng's life, which saw many upheavals. Now what's interesting is how he deals with this, how he copes with these challenges. And that's what really brings to life this individual, Liu Da Peng. The title itself comes from one of the dreams that Liu Da Peng writes about. In his description of the dream, he wakes up to a severe but gentle old man watching him, and he inquires of this person he calls master. He inquires how he is to better himself, because he feels like he isn't good enough to his parents. The old but gentle man looks down at him and says, if you wish to learn to be a sage, all you need to do is be sincere and respectful in your dealings. Throughout his early childhood, studying the set texts of Confucian imperial China, in this process learning by rote from memory a whopping 692,306 words at his own estimate, just in order to pass the exam. Liu Da Peng records interactions with his classmates saying, the point of our studying here is to improve our morals, not our food. As in, Liu Da Peng believes the purpose of studying is to become a better person, not to gain material wealth. On another occasion, one boy in school inquires, why do you eat so little, Liu Da Peng? And they make jokes about him. He ignores and smiles. And the other boy says, old Liu doesn't make jokes with us. This is clearly a man, or a boy at the time, separate from others around him. A man apart, a man out of his time already. And Liu passes the first level of examination, leaving to Beijing in order to pass the final exam, in order to take up position Now this exam was crucial. He was already a scholar, already at one level of a scholar, but in order to take up position as a civil servant, Liu had to go to Beijing. He went there 3 times, unfortunately failing every single time. Now by this time Liu is in his 30s, and it seems the dream of becoming a civil servant he had for so long is impossible to attain. He takes up position as a tutor to a family near Taiyuan, a wealthy merchant's family. It feeds his family, and Liu by this time has a family and a wife. The focus moves to his role as a son. There's one episode described in this book in his diary. Liu goes to a village fair with his father. They look up at the moon. Liu comments, "I wish it was possible that people's hearts shone as brightly as the moon." His father agrees with his son, saying, "Yeah, I agree with you there." Liu Da Peng replies, "I accept your teachings." Isn't this strange? Liu Da Peng's determination to view his father as a teacher. He turns his own words into his father's. He is forced still to place himself lower to his father as an intellectual. This shows that to Liu Da Peng it was the relationship with his parents that superseded all others, and this was obvious in the way he wrote very little about his wives in these stories, very sometimes warmly about his children, but very little about his wives, more so about his parents, constantly saying how guilty he was at not being able to see them very often due to being a tutor away from his home. Now the irony of this, of course, is that if he had become a civil servant, he would have been sent all across China to various cities via the whims of the imperial administration, so he wouldn't have had any control over his life even if he'd had the success that he wished for. Now by this time, forces outside Liu's control meant that the Imperial Entrance Examination system itself ended by this time in 1912, a system lasting all the way from 618 AD in the Tang Dynasty in various forms, all the way up to 1912, over 1,000 years later. This leaves Liu with some dilemmas. His education is now technically worthless with the modernization process going on in China with the leader Sun Yat-sen and various modernizers, leading to education system being adapted, and his role as a tutor, given that what he taught now is technically valueless, at least according to the ascendant system, means that people he employed him to tutor now don't need his services anymore. However, he takes up a role as representative of the people, as the entrance examination scholar in the area, one of the very few in the area, given that it was very rare for anyone to pass the exams at any level. They were very hard indeed. Liu Da Peng has sort of residual respect that people viewing him as a scholar of Confucian ideals, and he takes up roles as a representative to the new government system of the people, for example, doing censuses on the local community, and in the new infant system of local democracy that they tried out, Liu Da Peng writes down his criticisms. "They have little sense of modesty," he says, "and are not bashful. When they beg for your vote, they treat you like a god." I think Liu Da Peng, given what he was educated in, the Confucian moral system, the new system of democracy and candidates being selling themselves for the votes, would absolutely be viewed in this way. It makes sense. But these part-time roles are not enough for him now. he's got 6 mouths to feed. Liu Da Peng takes up mining and becomes a businessman, earning and running mines in Shaanxi, a region with a lot of coal. And the interesting thing about this is that he actually gets the money to buy these places on credit, in part due to the large amount of trust that people had in him as a respectable scholar. Again, yet another thing out of Liu Da Peng's control hits him. Shaanxi, a region previously a key corridor between the north of China and trading routes up to Mongolia and Russia, all the way to Moscow. Shaanxi trading houses, merchants were very well known at that time in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. Unfortunately, because of the Communist Revolution, at this time, these routes begin to close down. The mines close down. Liu is left with another dilemma. What to do now? 6 mouths to feed. He owns some land and he takes up the role of farmer. From imperial scholar of Beijing all the way to farmer, Liu manages to find some shining light in each of his roles. This is what I really admire about the guy. I think sometimes people can tend to let history wash over them and maybe let tragedies in life destroy them. And it's something that Liu never lets happen to him. He never lets it get to him that the Imperial entrance examination ends, he didn't fulfill his dream. He just keeps plugging away, trying to be a responsible person. Of course, being a Confucian romantic, like he was as a child, spouting, well, we're here to improve our morals. Now Liu writes down in his diaries, I am an old farmer and my heart is in the fields. He finds something to love about everything that he does, except perhaps being a tutor. That's probably one of the only things he obviously really didn't enjoy. Now, he's at the whim of the weather every year, and every harvest time is a worry for him. The author really gives us a clear impression of how sporadic the rain was in this region. There were famines in Liu's early years. Yet, amidst all this struggle that Liu has, by now he's in his 70s, farming his plot of land, only occasionally employing a part-time farmhand to help him out. It's back-breaking work. And amidst all this, he still manages to keep up his diary writing. In 1936, by now around 80, he's run out of paper. He has no money for paper anymore. And he goes into town and he picks up discarded boxes of cigarette packages in order to unfold them and continue his habits as a diary writer. And finally, with the Japanese invasion at around 80, Liu Da Peng is beaten by Japanese soldiers, and it's so tragic and heartbreaking because of the very fact that we know his life, we know his struggles to survive, we know how many children he had, we know all the challenges that he's faced, and to finally face this final humiliation is heartrending. He writes in his diary at the time, I'm full of remorse that I do not have the power that comes from virtue to rescue people from my village. I do not have the ability to touch the heart of heaven, above all remove suffering of the people below. So how can I comfort the spirits of my late parents in heaven? I am greatly to blame for my lack of filial piety. And there it is, the final guilt, feelings of guilt. It all comes down to feeling like he wasn't a good son. And I wonder why that was. Was that because he hadn't become the imperial civil servant his father wanted him to be? What a terrible load to carry throughout his life. All that pressure, all that expectation. Despite being, as far as I can see from his diaries, quite an upstanding, virtuous man from his actions and from what's recorded about him. Of course, he had his personality, his eccentricities. But this man really, I got the impression from reading this of a man out of his time, a genuine eccentric, someone who held on to morals that he believed were right when everyone around him let them go. And that's what's brilliant about this book. It really brings to life this dusty old black and white picture of a man that seems out of time now. In many ways was out of time even in his time. At the same time, a human being just trying to do his best. That's The Man Awakened from Dreams, recommended to anyone interested in Chinese cultural literature. The link for this book is in the description. I've been Mr. Sino Lit. Thank you very much. 再见.